Hey everybody, welcome back to Caveman Security. It's your host Robbie. Today we're going to go through a new series since we just finished the OWASP Top 10. Today we're going to go over API Recon for bug bounty hunters, finding APIs before finding vulnerabilities. So I think this is a really important topic, so let's get into it. Alright, so why Recon matters. A lot of times people are really interested in just finding the bugs, getting the money, and moving out. But they really don't understand what is the application doing, what's happening behind the scenes, what are the APIs doing, stuff like this. So a lot of times when we look at it, we need to understand the surface of the application, right? So you might be missing some APIs, might miss some documentation, shadow APIs exist, different things like this, right? So again, API Recon is discovering endpoints, parameters, API, documentation, whatever we want. We need to hunt before we attack. Okay, so create your inventory. I think this goes along with like another OWASP Top 10, which is like inventory management, right? So you have the recon mindset, not just the attacker mindset. You need to find everything before you can attack, because if you're just blindly throwing commands, doing random things, you're not going to find something, and probably 9 times out of 10 you're going to go out of scope, and then you might get in trouble, and you don't want that. So always do a lay of the land before you start attacking. Okay, so here's a good recon workflow. So obviously you need to understand the target, that's your scope. You need to go look for subdomains, documentation, endpoints, authentication, and testing. Okay, so these are really important. If you guys want to know more about this, I actually did this in a webinar for APISec University USA chapter. So check that out later. All right, so asset discovery is our first step. So it finds us in a likely exposed API. So your first goal is really to look for the functionality of the website. There's like Swagger files, website, or documentation everywhere. You really want to look for those. So here's some good examples. Look for apicompany.com, mobilecompany.com, developer.com, partners.com. These are going to be really great sections in a website to really understand what's happening behind the scenes. Okay, so if you can find these are really useful. Okay, look for good clues. Look for /API, V1, V2. We talked about this in versioning. GraphQL, people love GraphQL. Swagger, that's where your documentation, that's where your functionality is. Same with OpenAPI. Find those things that are kind of out there, and you'll have them. Of course, if you see developer, mobile partner, those are part of the architecture. So if you've seen those, then more likely there's some API documentation floating around somewhere. Okay. Remember, Swagger file, OpenAPI. These are the ways to know how the web application is functioning. What are the endpoints? Sometimes they give you examples on how to use them. So the more you can find them, the better. Okay, so you have the different endpoints like Swagger, Swagger UI, API docs, OpenAPI. You want to look for these, and these will help you a lot, I promise you. And actually, in our video, we're actually going to go through an integrity bug bounty hunting, and we're actually going to look at the API docs. So we'll go through that. Okay, Postman collections. People love Postman, especially developers, because they can put all the Swagger files in there, endpoints. They can save all the credentials, tokens, whatever. I know because I was a developer. So when I was in there doing testing, I would constantly have a trigger where when I open up Postman, it would automatically create a token for me so I could log in and do things. Was that safe? No, but for me it was convenient. So if it was convenient for me, it's going to be convenient for an attacker. Okay, do some JavaScript recon. Look for JavaScript files. Obviously in like developer tools, you can look for different files that may not have been covered or not have been hidden. So kind of take a look at those. Here's some good examples: API v1 users, API v1 profile, API v1 orders. So these type of things, these are really useful because they'll give you some telling information about the JavaScript. Okay. Using Burp and Kaido, these are really great tools. They're web auditing tools, so they help you to find endpoints, parameters, tokens, whatever. So instead of just attacking, start clicking around and kind of build up your inventory list. And I'll show you that here soon. Okay, remember, developer tools, I just talked about it. Hit F12, whatever functionality is on the browser. Start looking for the network. Start looking at the console. Start seeing what they tell you. Because if you run like an API, you're going to see it in the network. And depending on the browser, especially Firefox, you can actually manipulate things in the browser. So that's kind of getting into like LOL, which is like living off the land. So those are things that we want to do as well. Okay. Mobile apps, they're full of APIs. Why? Because that's what they're using. A lot of applications nowadays are cross-platform, so they're going to be good for Swift, Kotlin, web applications. So there's going to be APIs floating around everywhere. So just think about that. Okay, understanding authentication. How is the website taking authentication? Does it have cookies? Does it have JWTs? Does it use OAuth? Does it use magic links? Understand what it's doing. The better you know, the better you'll be. Understanding the business logic. What is that website doing? What is the purpose of that website? So if it's just there to collect information, if it's there to sell service, it's there to promote brand, you need to know about it so you know how to use it when you're starting to look for attacks. Okay, recon findings that excite me. So these things are really great. So I always look for Swagger files. I think these are really important. I look for GraphQL. If you've ever seen anything about GraphQL, it is probably the most dangerous thing you'll ever find because it is very good at pinpointing information. You can even find like the database for the users, and you can kind of find email, usernames, passwords, if they have not hardened that endpoint. If they haven't, and you can check it out, you're really, really in good luck. Really good shape too. Okay, mobile APIs. Really like to see those. Admin functionality. If you can use an endpoint at an admin level and you can start to change things, add things, whatever, it's really great. Of course, you want to look out for debug endpoints. Developers love debugging, so they're always going to have an endpoint there so they can fix things as they go. Export functionality. Can I download something? Can I exfiltrate data? Can I maybe import something? You need to check for those things. And of course, internal references. If you can get a hold of internal knowledge bases, stuff like this is great. Okay, common mistakes. Beginners, they're automatically just scanning. They just look for vulnerabilities. They just randomly use tools. That doesn't go anywhere quickly. Okay, professionals, they just kind of click around, kind of get an idea. They're like the user. They're trying to be the user to understand the purpose of the website. And then later, after they understand it, then they test it. Okay, so here's my checklist. So first thing you want to do is you need to know your scope. So obviously what our target is. Then you need to go into discovery. So subdomains, identify the API hosts. You need to search for the Swagger or Open API doc. Search for GraphQL or APIs, whatever you want to find. Review JS files. You really should look at that. Monitor traffic. Throw that in Kaido, Burp, see what it's doing. See how much traffic you get. Map endpoints, kind of do your inventory asset list. We'll go through that today. Identify auth, what is it doing? How is it functioning? Stuff like this. Understand workflows. So understand what is the purpose of this website? How is it operating? How does it, receive information? Stuff like this. And then finally, after you're done with all those things, then you can go into testing. Okay. So guys, here's just some key takeaways. Recon is not busy work, I promise you. I always quote this, but there's a really great hacker called Heath Adams. He's the cyber mentor. He was also in charge of TCM security. One thing that he taught me in one of his courses was you need to understand methodology before you know tools. And it's true because tools change all the time, tools die all the time. So methodology lives forever. So if you know how to do living out the land techniques, you understand recon, you know how to do things manually, you're going to go really far as a pen tester compared to tools. Okay. And yeah, so always remember, recon is where everything begins, not ends. So take your time, understand what you're looking at, and it's going to look really well. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and look at a real integrity website, and we're going to look at the bug bounty program. So if you guys are ready, let's go. Okay guys, so I'm just briefly showing you here as a proof of concept. We're going to look at this web application called Showpad. This is a VDP, so meaning I'm not going to get any money from this, but I want you guys to look at this. This is a real bug bounty program. We're just going to kind of take a look at it. So when you're scoping everything out, you need to kind of know what's in scope, what's out of scope. There's a huge list. I'm not going to go through all this like I did in my live, but the main thing is whatever this is our scope. Okay. So let's go ahead and travel over to our virtual machine and we're going to check it out. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up our browser from Kaido. I like to do this rather than using the certificates. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just lazy or maybe I just haven't taken the time, but I just don't do it. Okay, so let's just kind of go into like showpad.com and let's kind of take a look at it. So all we're going to do here is we're just going to build our sitemap. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to build everything in scope. So we'll say showpad scope. So just kind of make sure that everything's in there. So www. showpad.com. So anything that this website will see, this is everything that's inside. So we're not going to worry about that too much. Okay. So let's start clicking around. Let's just kind of see what it's about. So we see platform, we see like sales readiness. We'll just kind of click on things. That's all we're going to do. We're just going to click on things. Now, this website's kind of slow because I did this last time. And the reason why it's slow is because they're doing a lot of content tracking. So they're just kind of throwing things around. They're just kind of willy-nilly and doing their own thing. It's not very fun, but you got to do it. So the reason why we're doing this is so we can really kind of get lay of the land, see what's going on, kind of see why we're doing this. And you can see here, you can start learning a lot. It's kind of telling us, okay, there's some AI agents. They're using some solutions. Marketing, healthcare devices, this is kind of pretty easy. You can kind of tell just from looking at it at the get-go what it's trying to do. And this is good. So, as we go through this, it's a boring process, but, we just want to click around. That's the first thing I do. What is it doing? Why are we doing this? What industry is it serving? And this is important. So, just kind of look at it, kind of see what it's doing, kind of hang out. You don't need to be an expert at what they're trying to do, but just, kind of build your reference sheet, kind of take a look at what's going on. They have blogs, ooh, maybe I can, kind of see if I can look for a form. Maybe I can do cross-site scripting, different things. But if I don't look through these, then how am I going to know? Ooh, webinar. Maybe I can try to get a free webinar. Who knows? Can I register for that? Can I enter information? I can, probably. Okay. Now, one thing that is really important here, and I think it's fine, they have a partner program. So you can kind of see that they will allow you to do different things, see different things, whatever. But here, this one's really important. We have our developer portal. So I don't know why they have this in public. I don't know if this is meant to be or what it's supposed to do, but it gives you a lot of information. So if you look at the guides, you can see that they have Showpad API, build Showpad API, webhooks, all this stuff. So the big thing is you have access to their API documentation. So how useful is this? It could be useful, but we can kind of look at that. We can look at the API documentation now, and we can just kind of look at it, see what it's doing. Because really, you want to see what's happening, right? So the more information you check, the more things you do, the better you go, right? So I think this is great because you start to really understand what it is it's doing. So here you go. You see all this. You see all the information. It's really, really useful. So, kind of really be like, ooh, this is good because you really learn a lot. So you see references, V2 or V3, V4. So, they're doing something with that. So, kind of be mindful. Look at one of the V3s, for example. I think in this one actually shows you the whole list of APIs that you can look at. And this is really important. So yeah, look, you can see everything. You can see endpoints, assets, channels, users, user groups. You can kind of see every endpoint that they're using and how to use it. And you see the requests and everything. Okay. So now that we've kind of just walked around a little bit, let's go back to Kaido. And we're going to go back to segment. So here we have a lot of junk we don't really need. But one thing that we only got is Showpad. So we want to take a look at this. And look at that. We start looking at all this documentation that we've kind of gathered just by clicking. That's all we did. We just clicked around. We see JavaScript files. We see developer files. We see forms. Look at that. I can manipulate the form if I wanted to. Look at that. And then, go down. You start to see, okay, here's API documentation. There's an open API. I can look at V3 YAML. Look at all the information there. Docs, APIs, more APIs. So the point I'm trying to get with this is, take the time. You can see that it went from being a very little area to being like a very big area. So, always, always, always do a lay of the land because you can always find very interesting information. And the more you find, the more you might go, maybe I can try an attack here. Or, oh, I never thought about this. So take your time, do recon. I guarantee it's going to save your life. Okay? So guys, hopefully you guys like this video and we'll see you guys in the next one.